All right, so today we have a special guest joining us. He is the voice of Barry Jelly on Adult Swim's The Jellies. He is a roast master and just an overall funny guy. Please welcome comedian Earl Skakel. Then hopefully I did that right.
You're one of the few who's actually gotten it right on the first shot.
Awesome.
I get all kinds of variations, like I was telling you guys, Skankle, Skunkle, Skagel. So thanks for. It's going to be a good interview because you got my last name right.
It's almost like he didn't practice it for like, I don't know, 15 minutes beforehand. Just constantly asking me how it was. I was like, all right.
All right.
Yeah, it's the worst thing you can do is try and practice saying my last name right.
So I'm
it's
already.
a tough one. It's not that long of a name, but it seems to give a lot of people problems.
Hey, I got the same issue with my last name. I have every variation, and it's Jarom, but I get Jarom, Jaron. I've had teachers argue with me that the J in my last name is silent. So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
That would be a cool last name, Harum.
yeah.
you could just become like a last name podcast, you know? I mean, or we could, let's talk about hockey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's worse podcast ideas out there. So,
So
never say never in the podcasting world.
exactly. Yeah. So Earl, you are. So we have a mutual contact that actually put us in connection. Rossi, he writes over for Hockey Buzz, and he said you kind of reached out because he started writing for the Kings, and he was telling me a little bit about your backstory, like how you found the Kings and all that. But first off, what really got you into hockey?
Well, I'm from Los Angeles originally. Not many natives in LA are from here, and but I'm 50, so in the late 70s and early 80s, the King games were not on television really. I mean, this was at a time where the NBA finals were literally on tape delay on Friday nights. Uh, so it's crazy now. They're all over the place, but when I think the Lakers beat the 76ers, and that was the very famous series where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got hurt and Magic had to play center. One of the most important games, some might argue the most important game ever in Laker history, which is pretty wild statement given all the important games they've played.
Yeah.
That game was on television in Los Angeles at 1 a.m. Tape delay, so everyone knew the result of the game. So you can imagine the coverage that hockey got if the Showtime Lakers were getting that kind of
pretty much
coverage. So I actually grew up somewhat of a Rangers fan because for some weird reason the cable system I had in my house got channel WOR, Channel 9 in New York, and they televised probably about 30 to 40 Ranger games a year. So I was much more familiar with the Rangers growing up, and I was obsessed with one player by the name of Barry Beck, who at the time, now he wouldn't be a big player at all, but back then he was 6'3", 220, definitely the biggest player in the league at that time, maybe he and Clark Gillies, and he was just so good, and he had this wild what we call out here in Hollywood a Jew fro. Is like a white guy's afro, and he was, he had the hardest shot in the league. He was the best body checker in the league, arguably the best fighter in the league, along with Clark Gillies. And you never got to see them fight each other because they had a handshake agreement. Unless it's really a extenuating circumstance, I won't fight you. So I just became obsessed with him, and then got into George McPhee, who now is, of course, the GM of the Vegas Knights. And the 80s was a fantastic time to become a hockey fan.
Oh yeah.
The sport was so wild, and the rivalries were just, the Nordiques and the Montreal Canadiens each game would take 3 or 4 hours. There were so many fights and skirmishes. So I really became in love with that part of the game, which is completely devoid in today's game.
Yeah, you definitely don't have that today. There's like those games that you'll get sometimes where you see glimpses of like the past and how it used to be, when like sometimes teams just like absolutely hate each other for whatever reason, and it's just like 200, 300 probably minutes in a game, and like those are always so fun to see still. but definitely far and few between. Not like it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's I watch regular season hockey now, and it's like the games are a glorified scrimmage.
Mhm.
And that's why I still love playoff hockey, because that's about the closest things you'll get in terms of what the old days were like. It's just there were some great series this year. Columbus and Tampa they didn't fight a lot, but I don't think they fought at all. But it was you had to fight for every square inch of ice, and the Stanley Cup Finals wasn't. I don't think there was a fight. I don't think there was a fight in the playoffs, but it was very emotional. But I'm not saying I expect bench clearing brawls in every game, but the regular season is pretty boring hockey. It's in this era.
It is, yeah. What you talk about, I mean, we grew up watching 90s hockey, so I mean, we kind of got a little spillover of the 80s and all that. And I would say now it's like, I do love the game. I love just seeing the skill players out there. I mean, we get to watch Patrick Kane every night kind of thing. But it's like at the same time, it's like I kind of feel bad for the new fans, because there's just something about that grit hockey, old school hockey, that it's just a completely different level than what this game is now. And I almost wonder if like some of the new fans would appreciate it as much if they knew the history of the game like that.
Oh, which is what makes YouTube great. If you go, and I get no money from directing people to this particular video, but it's a 9-minute Barry Beck highlight clip, and it's probably like 30 of his hits, a couple of his fights, but every single hit would be a penalty in this era. I mean, he's running guys, he's jumping at them, he's clotheslining them, not getting called. I mean, the emotion that evoked, because then the other team, there was one play where he literally picked up Bob Gould of the Washington Capitals, picked him up and just threw him into the boards, and just the next 2 minutes of that game was like a Kiss concert. It was so exciting, because then you get the Capitals riled up, and then the Rangers, and back then, like in the Rangers case, they had 5-6 tough guys on the team. Like, you had Beck, you had a guy, Ed Hospodar, you had Ron Greshner was a tough guy, George McPhee, Chris Katsopoulos, the Maloney brothers. I mean, nowadays you're lucky if you have one guy.
Yeah, and that guy also has to be able to skate fast and pretty much do something else besides just fighting, if they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, like the Blackhawks had a guy in the 80s by the name of Wayne Van Dorp, who I don't think he literally didn't start skating until he was like 15. But he was so fun to watch, because he was just like Sloth from the Goonies out there. And you might argue it's maybe better you get rid of guys like that, but I still kind of selfishly miss guys like him in the league, just because you knew when he was out there something was going to go down.
Oh yeah, it was more of that self-policing time of hockey too, where like if something went wrong, those enforcers are coming out and they're gonna make it right. Like, that was always like crazy exciting to watch when that was still going on in like the early 90s and like mid 90s too. Just
oh yeah, I mean, even in the 90s, you guys, like you said, got a little taste of it. You had guys like Christoph Oliwa still playing, and Scott Stevens was certainly more than just a fighter, but the Kings always had a couple tough guys. They had Troy Crowder at one point, and Jay Miller, and they always have had fairly tough teams. Even now, they are one of the few teams that employs a tough guy by the name of Curtis McDermott, I'm so old, I remember his dad Paul playing. But it's kind of a sad time for people who like the rougher element of the game, which is basically being policed out of really all of hockey. It's starting even in junior hockey now. I think they kick you out if you have one fight.
Yeah,
all the players have to have a face shield on in juniors now. So that, I think, prevents a lot of fights, because the kids don't want to hurt their hands. So it's definitely a different style of hockey than I grew up with.
Yeah, USA Hockey, you're not even allowed to start checking until you're a Bantam, which is like 8th grade, freshman year of high school.
Did they change that?
It was like 2 or 3 years ago they made that change,
Oh, no way.
which blows my mind because Canada, you can start doing that when you're a squirt, which is like what, 8, 9
Right,
years
when you're
old?
like 10.
Yeah,
Or like 8 or 9 or something.
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, and that's why they kick our ass in hockey in almost every tournament. But it's just I kind of get sad when I talk about it because I just remember the games were so emotional back then, and even in the '90s, it was still pretty rough and tumble style. But now it's tough guys, agitators are the new tough guys like Brad Marchand and
Matthew
Alex
Tkachuk.
Burrows. Yeah, I mean Matthew Tkachuk. I mean if he was playing against the Kings in the mid '80s and you elbowed Larry Murphy, who was the best defenseman on the Kings for a little bit in that era, you would have had Jay Wells killing him. You would have had Dean Kennedy going after him. You would have had Tiger Williams. You would have had 6, 7 guys going after him.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even think. I think in the next game they played Calgary. I think Clifford and McNabb fought him, Braden McNabb. But he kind of. I don't know. I mean, I guess I can't fault guys like Tkachuk and Marchand and a couple others. That's how the league's gonna go, and you can excel and not being tougher than the next guy, but just being a bigger dick. Why not?
Yeah,
if that's helping your game and you're putting up points, I mean, you're bringing other people off of their game. Like, if it works, right?
I mean, I know the Kings have a 21-year-old kid they got from Toronto in the Jake Muzzin trade. His name's Carl Grunstrom.
yeah.
He'll be, if all things work out, hopefully, he'll be like the Kings' Thomas Holmstrom, where he's not necessarily dirty, but he crosses the line, arguably. But that's the kind of player now that teams want, is someone who can score goals and maybe scare the other team, that they'll be hit from behind if you turn your back on the guy. And it's just kind of sad that that's what I have to look forward to, is instead of a good fight, maybe there'll be a dirty hit.
Yeah, you still see that sometimes, like now, which just sucks too. Like if it's like a dirty hit or even a clean hit that's like pretty big, there's not a lot of guys that you see like answering the bell for it, because they'll either back down or no one on the other team will want to like actually drop the mitts with them, which kind of sucks. You always used
I mean, if Marchand played in the '80s or even a little earlier, the late '70s, he better hope he played on the Flyers. You had like 7 or 8 guys. Or the Rangers.
That's a short career if he's in that time
period. If he
period.
played on a weaker team, like say the Atlanta Flames, where they didn't have a lot of tough guys, he would have been decapitated.
I think even if he was on one of those tougher teams and he goes around kissing and licking people, he might get his ass beat by his own teammates.
Oh yeah, I mean his own. I mean, and I've heard from people in the know, I guess, hockey reporters I know, that most of his own team doesn't like him. But when they're winning Stanley Cups, I'm sure he is a great player, for sure in his case. That's
the most frustrating thing about it, is that he's so good that he doesn't need to be doing that little licking and kissing and all that stuff. If you want to be an agitator, go for it, but don't do like the little crap like that. That's what's frustrating with that guy.
Yeah, and then you could see the same kind of qualities in Tkachuk in Calgary, and even almost to a smaller degree, his brother who plays on Ottawa, actually the whole Tkachuk family. I mean, they don't have to be like that, but I think they feel personally it makes them the player who they are. I mean, I can only imagine if Marchand just concentrated on playing, he could probably get 140 points.
Oh, yeah. It just, I remember like thinking about it. It's like, that's who, people now, the new fans, they see that like, oh, that's the big tough guy. And it's like, we grew up, I know me, Tanner, and all, we grew up, Bob Probert was our guy. And it was just like, first off, I was fortunate enough to meet him before he passed. the nicest guy in the world. I've met superstar players that are the complete biggest dicks, and the goon that, probably doesn't know what the hell's actually going on is sitting there having conversations. I was like 10 years old, and he was sat there and talked with me for 45 minutes. Coolest guy in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he was the king. He was the Mike Tyson of my era for sure. And it's obviously a sad way he ended his life. Especially dying in front of his family. I mean, I can't imagine the nightmares that they probably have to this day. Just that visual of him in a boat having a heart attack. But there's a great documentary on him that I just saw. I think it's on Amazon. And, they had his family on, and you obviously know that they were going to be sad. But then they interviewed guys like Ty Domi, and he's crying. And Troy Crowder, you could see him welling up. And, there's Craig Cox, who's actually, I think, the only NHL player ever from Chula Vista, California. But, he's known mainly for his 3 fights he had with Probert, and you could see the impact of his death on those guys because they were all kind of welling up and, in Domi's case, out and out crying. Those 80s enforcers, they usually don't end very well.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just shows like what this game is. This game's a brotherhood kind of thing too. It's like no matter what, it's they're there for each other in the end too, which is just another reason why I think this is just such the greatest game in the world, because I don't think too many other sports you can go out there, beat the crap out of the guy, and then go have a beer with them afterwards.
Yeah, well, I think most of them have literally been playing with each other since 10 years old. I'm sure Probert and Crowder played against each other in the minors and in juniors, and so there's a brotherhood of sorts that I guess if we're on opposite sides, we have to fight, but I'll see you at the titty bar after the game. Which I think is where Probert ended up most nights.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
When you talk about a tough team, I mean the Red Wings, coach, because that was the crazy thing about Probert is if you beat him, the few guys that actually beat him, like Todd Ewan or maybe a couple other guys, I think Chris Tamer, and, if you beat him, you had to fight Koser, and then you knew you had to probably fight Probert again because he would want a rematch. So can you imagine being a tough guy playing the Red Wings in the mid '80s like that? I mean, you probably didn't get any sleep that week.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's gotta be rough stuff. I remember. I mean, just listening to like other like players tell their story about like being fighters in the NHL and like saying like there's nights where they just would not be able to go to sleep beforehand because they knew they had to fight the next day. Is just absolutely crazy to me. So I can't imagine when it's like early '80s and things like that when you're fighting every game basically.
Oh yeah, and because like I said, each team back then, or I would probably at least say 80% of the teams had anywhere from 3 to 6 guys on the team who could fight. If you look at some of those Quebec Nordique teams in the mid to late '80s, my God, I mean they had Darren Kimball, Van Dorp played on them, Basil McRae, Ken McRae, Craig Smith. I mean, all on the same team, like the Roberge brothers. There's. I used to collect hockey fight tapes, and probably the most sought after tapes in the hockey fight collecting world were the Nordique training camps, because they would invite like 6 more guys to get those guys going. So it was just like the octagon on ice in Quebec City.
Man, would you say that you're a hockeyfights.com fan?
Oh yeah, I mean I go on all the usual sites, hockeyfights.com, hockey-fights.com, dropyourgloves.com, and then that's the great thing about YouTube is you can go on YouTube and just put in pretty much any fight, Darren Kimball versus Rudy Poshek, and there's a high def clip of it. Rudy Poshek was another guy who got me into really following certain tough guys, because he would get into a fight, and whether he won or lost, he would put his hands in the air like Rocky after every fight.
Just
the crowd just
or what?
Oh, he was great, and he developed such a cult personality that even David Letterman had him on the show once. He pointed him out in the crowd. He's like, "Hey, you're Rudy Poshek," and wouldn't figure David Letterman was a hockey guy, but that's another guy who, from the mid to late '80s, he ended up like homeless, and there's another guy out here, Matt Johnson, who was a real big tough guy for the Kings, is literally homeless in Santa Monica now.
Yeah.
I mean, the league does not take care of these guys too well.
No, and that's one thing too that I know. I don't know how much you follow like hockey, like social media and all that. Like Daniel Carcillo is just lighting up anybody who he can reach out to about talking about CTE and all that kind of stuff, and how the league needs to just start taking care of these players a little bit. Do you think it is the kind of like on the league to be doing this kind of stuff for these guys, or do you think it's kind of like they should know basically coming into it, especially if they're going to play that rough style?
I mean, I think all of them have a certain responsibility. It's the league, it's the individual teams. I mean, you look at Bob Probert, the Red Wings and Blackhawks made a lot of money off of him, and jersey sales and ticket sales, and Matt Johnson was a very popular player in the Kings because he was like seen at one point, I think, as the heir apparent to Probert, just because he was a monster. I think he came out of Peterborough in the OHL where he was the champ, and he was just 6'5", 240, just a giant teenager. And I don't see the Kings or the league, anyone helping him. I mean, he's literally right now homeless in Santa Monica. No help, no nothing. His parents don't even know how to, because there was an article in the LA Times about him, I think maybe a year ago. And, I think Carcillo burned a few bridges when he was playing in the league, because he was kind of one of those, like a precursor to Marchand, so I don't know if he's the best ambassador to talk about what he's talking about, just because he probably caused a fair amount of concussions himself the way he played.
That's true. He has spoken out about that though too, and about like the way that he played, and he's come to like, I don't know, trying to reconcile that and like trying to get people to understand just like how much it fucks with people really, and like
I mean, he's almost kind of like the little boy who cried wolf. It's like, well, dude, look at how you played, and now that it's affecting you in a negative way, you're speaking out about it, but you weren't speaking out about it when you were hitting guys from behind, or maybe in a fight and you hit the guy when he was defenseless. But I do like what he's doing. In one hand, he's the perfect guy to talk about it because he's going through it, and he's lost. I know he's very good friends with Steve Monador, who died, and he probably knew Wade Belak and a couple other boys who died. So I just think because of the style that he himself played, that I think people are not as accepting of his positions. If like Sidney Crosby spoke out about it, I think, oh well, you weren't a dirty player, you weren't a tough guy. You probably it's coming from the heart more than, let's say, from Carcillo.
So so let's change it up a little bit or get a little happier topic maybe.
What a great topic to talk about for 40 minutes. NHL tough guys killing themselves. What's the next topic? The Holocaust?
Yeah. So you grew up in LA, and you were around the time that the team was coming into the league. Did you?
We were talking about how you liked the Rangers for a little bit. How did you start liking the Kings?
Well, so what I was going to bring up is, obviously, I mean, ice is hard to get out there. I'm assuming still now it's hard to get out there. Were you able to play at all growing up, or Do you
Oh
do you
yeah,
skate
yeah. I mean,
now?
I have an NHL speed slap shot, but unfortunately, my skating style, the guy who used to give me lessons was like, Earl, you skate like Mick Jagger walks. Uh, so I was not a good skater, but I have a really, really hard shot. It's like Goldberg from the Mighty Ducks. It's unexplainable how I get the power behind it. Um, but yeah, I mean, ice time. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, is like there was literally 2 rinks in Southern California. There was one where the Kings would practice in a place called Culver City, and then one actually in Santa Monica, which is a beach community out here. And then when Gretzky came, ice rinks started popping up like Starbucks. I mean, they were everywhere. And then when he left, a couple of them went out of business. So, I mean, there's a fair amount out here now. And, there's a bit of a resurgence when they won 2 cups in 3 years. I mean, hockey was the sport for, probably 4 or 5 years out here recently. And then, now they've started somewhat losing again. And so it's back to, almost an apathetic attitude toward the team. But, they had a good draft this year, so hopefully they turn it around a little quicker. They have a lot of bad contracts on the team.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're in a similar position as to the Blackhawks. We've got Kane and Taves and Seabrook and Keith. I mean, those are 4 huge contracts. So it's hard to maneuver, especially for the Kings because, they sold their souls to the devil to win those cups with, Carter's contract and Gabrick's contract. But, Gabrick in that second cup run, he's probably the reason they won because he was scoring a lot of goals. So it's would you rather have 2 cups or none in a good salary cap situation?
Yeah, exactly. That's the same with the Blackhawks. Like, do you want the cups or no? Like, I would gladly be in cap hell every season if we had just won the cup the previous season. But
I mean, it's a tough. It's pick your poison. What do you want? And with the Kings, there's some other situations that the Voinov situation really is probably still affecting this team, even though he hasn't been in the league in 5 years. They had to make a lot of trades to try and find a replacement for him, and they never really found one. I mean, they traded a first-round pick to Edmonton to get Carolina. And that didn't work out. He only played 12 games here and got hurt, and then he left the Kings to go to Edmonton. So, that's, a first-round pick you didn't get to use. And then there was other trades that they made, So it's the Voinov situation still is affecting them.
Yeah, their team's catching a little bit of the age bug as well. Like players got those contracts still, and it seems like most of the stars on that team are in their 30s to mid 30s at this point. It's getting harder for them to push like they were earlier, like 2010s. It was I mean,
their problem is they're not completely over the hill. So like Jonathan Quick, he's only 34. Like that's not. I mean, it's not young in the NHL, but he's still one of the better goaltenders in the league. Carter's in his or he's probably about the same age, maybe 33-ish. And they're in the worst position you can be in, where they're not completely awful, and they have enough good players that they're always gonna kind of be sniffing around the middle of the pack, which in the NHL, I guess in any league, you either want to be really good or really bad.
Yeah.
Very true.
It's just unfortunately that's the way the system is set up. So if you're like saying that 12th through 24th position in the league, you're going to be drafting always in the middle of the first round, maybe at the tail end of the first round, and you're just not going to get a difference maker. Just so you either have to tank or, just be so bad you're not even tanking. You're just a bad team, which is the Kings were kind of in the middle last year.
Right.
You guys got
it's
you guys got lucky with
yeah. And they had a bad luck with the lottery balls. I mean, you guys went from 12
we
to
got
number.
lucked out.
But that's great, though. I mean, I do think it's a fair system. I mean, it's that way for everyone, and unfortunately for the Kings, I think they had the second highest chance of getting the number 1 pick, and then fell to number 5, and they still got a really good player.
Yeah, I
so
was
it's
to say
not a
you guys
complete
got
loss.
you
But,
guys got really lucky with Turcotte.
obviously, I'm sure they would have rather have had Kako or Hughes.
Oh yeah,
but Turcotte's a nice consolidation prize.
Yeah, that whole top 5 was gonna be great anyway. Like, I mean, at least like the top 7, definitely great players all around. Number 1 and 2 were gonna be clearly those two, but like with the Hawks, that was always the biggest story for us, was just like, who are they gonna take? Who are they gonna take? And then they still just completely like did something we didn't even think about. We're like, oh, okay, that sounds good still. Like, he's gonna be a good player. But that's like,
I mean, I thought they would go after the young defenseman Byram.
yeah.
Because they are a little older on the defensive core, and I thought actually Byram was going to go to the Kings, because I thought, well, Colorado doesn't need another young defenseman, and there was rumors that you guys were going to get Turcotte,
right.
and that we were going to get the guy you got, Doc. But for whatever reason, they liked Doc better than Turcotte, and then Colorado went. I don't know if it was completely against the grain, but they picked the young defenseman, so Turcotte kind of fell to us. But I'm excited about the Russian kid they got in the second round, who had 51 goals.
You're right, or no?
Well, they got the Swedish defenseman at 22. I might be mispronouncing his name, and I feel bad after giving you guys shit for my name. Bjorfurt, or Bjofort. So however you say that.
Bjorfurt? It's probably
yeah, Tobias. But then there's only 2 kids this year who had 50 goals. Caulfield, who went to Montreal, and the Russian kid the Kings drafted in the second round. So I thought they had a really good draft. So, of course, in LA, though, in the middle of July, I don't think there's a lot of buzz about the Kings draft.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're signing, and the Lakers are getting Anthony Davis, the Clippers are getting Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So it was the Kings draft, even though I thought it was arguably the best out of all the teams. And I'm not a complete homer, but I really think they got 3 super strong players, was not high up on the news reports in the local news.
So how frustrating is that, kind of being like, this diehard hockey fan, and just being in a city where you're like, yeah, like this is awesome, like let's go, and it's just nothing.
I mean, you just in LA, there's just too much to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to win, no matter what sport. I mean, and when the Kings win, it is a hockey town. But like I said, I mean, this summer is the perfect example of, the Lakers and Clippers probably were the 2 most news-making teams in the NBA with what they did. And, the Dodgers, I think, are in first place. I mean, the Angels are doing okay, but they have Mike Trout, maybe the greatest player in baseball in the last 20 years. You've got the Galaxy out here, which are, very popular in the soccer world.
You got the Rams.
So the Rams are Super Bowl contenders. You've got the Chargers, who, I mean, no one really cares about in LA, but they're a very good team.
Right.
And maybe there'll be a little bit of a resurgence with Charger talk in the new stadium. Because right now they literally are playing in the Galaxy Stadium, and it's in a area of LA that it's kind of in between Orange County and LAX. It's like in a dead spot in terms of where people want to go in Los Angeles. So hockey news, I don't think there's too many players that could, even if the Kings went out and got Ovechkin, which is not going to happen. I don't mean to, but like, he's probably the most popular player in the league. I don't even think that would make news if they got him.
That is crazy.
The NHL just doesn't have that many name stars that would cause a buzz in LA anyway.
was gonna say I didn't realize until now that LA basically has 2 teams for every sport besides hockey. When they
and then plus you've got the Ducks, whatever they do. Although I don't think there's a lot of competition. I don't think the Ducks, really compete with the Kings in the news department, just because it's they're in Orange County, which is a suburb of LA to the south. But it is another team that you have to kind of fight for the market share, even though it's probably about 75 miles between us. So, but it's just another sports team that you have to kind of compete with. And then you've got the entertainment, mecca of the world, arguably. So, if you have a choice of going to see a losing hockey team or, going to a movie or whatever, you're probably going to pick the movie.
Yeah.
Jesus. It's a lot of things going on there.
So
yeah. What's going on over there? What's going on in Chicago?
Chicago is
nothing. Baseball. That's all we got going on right now. Baseball.
That's enough. Well, you guys have the Cubs, you have the White Sox. I mean, you guys are almost in a similar position. You've got 2 baseball teams. You've got a iconic basketball team. The Bears. So there's. I'm sure the Blackhawks. Face a somewhat similar of a situation as the Kings, where if you start losing, people just find something else to spend their money on.
It's worse out here because people still show up to games. Like, we still have our sellout streak and all that, even then when they were playing absolute garbage the last 3 years. But the thing that gets me the most frustrated here is the everybody that's been watching hockey for 5 years are now coming experts on what the Hawks need to do to get back to their glory days, and that's like the most irritating thing for me personally. Just like threads everywhere. It's just like, okay, I'm no more internet for me today.
Yeah, I just think you get unreasonable fans, and that's probably in every city that, trade. Why don't we trade for Austin Matthews? Well, it's going to cost your whole team. And I know there's some King fans who's like, why didn't we make a play for Panarin? It's like, all the bad contracts you have on this team, you want to bring in an $11 million contract a year, so well, I just think fans are unrealistic.
Oh yeah.
I'm fairly realistic. Like, sure, I'd love if the Kings went out and got Panarin, because he is kind of exactly in the age range of what you want. 27 years old. He's in his prime. He'll be in his prime probably for the next 5 years. But he makes too much money. For the Kings anyway, and probably for the Blackhawks. I'm sure they kick tires on him too. But the Rangers don't have a lot of horrific contracts outside of Shattenkirk, so he was the perfect fit, money and probably skill wise for them.
Just the lifestyle that he was looking for too. He really wanted to be in a big city on the East Coast, and that just ended up working out really well for him, which is pretty nice. We would have loved to have him back in Chicago. You know how much we like to get the band back together all the time, even though we didn't win a championship with him, but like we love bringing back our old players.
Oh yeah, the Kings do that too. But I thought, and I'm sure they probably lobbed him a phone call, because in LA we have an amazing Russian community, which I know was very important to him. And it's actually just to the east of where I live. It's like if you're Russian and you're either moving here from Russia, or you're looking to ingratiate yourself into a Russia-like community. LA is, I would say, maybe short of Florida, is the top Russian community. But I know there's one in New York that I'm sure he'll enjoy. And I think LA is a great place for free agents, because you can kind of play in anonymity out here. Most of the players live by the beach. I'm sure they go to the beach on off days or whatever, and no one knows who they are.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And, that's why especially when they were winning, they had no problems getting free agents, because I live on the beach, make the money I make, and I won't be hounded by overzealous fans because there really aren't any. Yeah, sign me up. But now that they're losing a little bit more than they were a couple of years ago, it's probably a tough sell.
I don't know if Panarin's going to make it to the season. There's comments that he just came out to basically talking trash about Putin. So we'll see if he makes it to opening night.
Yeah, I think that's not really a guy you want on your bad side. But who knows? Maybe he can talk to Trump and they can work out a deal where he won't get poisoned. Before the first preseason game against the Islanders, or maybe Putin will pay one of the Islanders to take him out.
So how do you feel? Because I have my opinion on this. When the Hawks were winning we were winning their cups. Kings were winning their cups. The rivalry between the Hawks and the Kings was probably some of the best hockey that was played in a long time. Do you feel the same way about that?
Oh yeah, I mean it was a great. If you look at that, 5-year run, it was either the Kings or the Blackhawks were winning the cups.
It was awesome.
It always it probably would have been a bit better of a rivalry if they were a little closer to each other geographically.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously for us, the Ducks would probably be the best example of that. Although, they've never really been at that level of where they were winning cups at the same time. Like for us, it's probably the Kings and the Sharks is the best rivalry for us, just because it's maybe a 2-hour plane ride up there. So you have a fan base goes both ways to see their team. But yeah, it was a great rivalry with the Blackhawks because, you had Kane and Taves in their prime and, Doughty and Kopitar in their prime, and the goaltenders were pretty even. And, two big physical teams, those are probably the two of the last, outside of the Blues this year, where it was like grinding hockey was the style that was in vogue. So, when you have two teams play the same style, only one can win, especially if they're in the same conference. So it was a nice run for both teams.
I want 2014 back so bad.
I want that almost Quick versus Crawford fight. I wanted that to happen so badly. Like when it was going down in that Western Conference Final Series. Oh my God, that was just the most exciting hockey I've seen in so long too. Like unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean they had a mutual respect for each other. I mean, but you could tell when the game was on there was a borderline hatred because both teams knew that to win the cup you had to beat that other team. It's not like the Sharks or the Ducks or the Coyotes were the team you had to go through. I mean, every team in the Western Conference knew that if you were going to get to the Cup Finals, let alone win it, you had to beat either the Kings or the Hawks. So, it's probably the last many dynasties that we'll see. Just because the Hawks won 3 in 6 years.
Yeah.
Kings won 2 and 3, and I really think that that middle cup the Kings I think lost to you guys in the double overtime. That Stoll doesn't get hurt, and Voinov, I think he was hurt as well. If they could have won 3 cups in a row, that could have been the dynasty talk, but they didn't. So
I mean, you kept us 3 cups in a row as well.
Yeah, I mean it's I don't think it's been a while since you've seen 2 teams. It was either one team or the other winning the cups, but who knows? They're both kind of going through the same growing pains now with the contracts and the older players. So maybe they'll start winning again at the same time and kind of revisit the rivalry.
Yeah, hopefully their timeline matches up again, especially since we both just got like a top 5 pick this year. So like maybe we'll start rolling it back into like meeting each other in the playoffs pretty soon. That'd be pretty great. Yeah,
I mean it's I think they're both in that, unfortunately, that dead spot of like I mean drafting in the middle, and because they're both good enough where they can make the playoffs this year, this upcoming season. which is, you almost don't want that.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds weird to say that because, all of us are fans, so we want them to win. But at least in the Kings case, they probably need another top 5 pick to get the rebuild in full swing.
Absolutely, makes sense.
Which is why this year's draft lottery really was like a kick in the balls. Because I didn't think they were going to get the first pick. We're not that lucky, but we'll get Kako. That's good enough. I mean, that's something that could add another 2-3 years onto the rebuild, going from 2 to 5 in the order. So, but it is what it is. It's a fair system. So hopefully Turcotte and Doc for you guys can, get it going.
Absolutely. It's going to will be something to keep an eye on in the next few years,
No, for sure. And like with the Kings anyway, I don't think the Hawks are going to trade Kane or Tays or, maybe one of Dunk or Seabrook. But
if someone wants Seabrook, they can take him.
They have several players. They can, Carter would look good on a team that, needs goal scoring for the playoffs. And then, Quick would, we have 2 really good young goalies in the system out here. So, Quick would, maybe be a nice consolidation prize to the teams who lost out on Bobrovsky. Kings, I think, have a few tradable assets. Martinez is often rumored to be going. Like the Muzzin trade for the Kings was really good. I mean, we got 3 prospects for him. So, if we could do maybe one more trade like that with a team desperate to get into the playoffs, or, make a mark in the playoffs like Toronto wanted Muzzin, that could help accelerate the rebuild out here big time.
Definitely. All right, Earl. Well, took enough of your time today. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can our listeners find you on social media and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I better spell my last name, but just on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Earl Skakel, which is just EARL SKAKEL. And obviously, like everyone else, I have a podcast, and it's really simple, just called Inappropriate Earl. And it's kind of, to be honest with you, the guests are really anyone who can come to my house and record. So I've been lucky enough to have Theo Fleury and Dustin Pinner.
Oh, no way.
That they actually were in my house. So there's a fair amount of hockey talk, and I also have a lot of musicians on from some of my favorite bands from the 80s, and obviously a lot of roast battle related episodes and stand up in general. So if you want a podcast, it's about everything but nothing at the same time. Check it out. Thank you guys for having me on, and thank you to Rossi for setting this up.
Yeah, definitely. We got to have you on again soon, and we'll get Rossi on here too, and probably have a nice solid 2-hour conversation with everybody on that one.
Yeah. Get me and K. Trevor Wilson on at the same time, and we'll do a roast battle over the phone.
That would be amazing.
That'd be pretty sick.
K. Trevor's a good man. He was an incredibly tough opponent, and one of the nicest guys in comedy, in life, really. The guy's so nice. You're you can't be like this. What's your angle, dude?
The stereotypical Canadian.
No, but he's so nice. I can't express to you how nice that guy is. So, it goes back to what we were talking about, hockey tough guys not liking each other. All the people I've roast battled, people think I don't like them, and I don't like K. Trevor Wilson or Jimmy Carr, and I love all of them. It's just, it's like a hockey fight. It's just business.
Exactly. That's so perfect.
All right, Earl, thank you so much again for coming on. And like I said, if you ever want to come talk hockey, let us know. Open invitation whenever you want to come on.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something before the season starts, like a preview of, all the 3rd and 4th line players that are going to be playing for probably both teams this year.
Definitely.
So I'd love to. I had a lot of fun, and thank you guys.
All right. Thank you, man. Have a good one.
Hey, man.
All right, boys. Have a good night.